everybody, it's your girl Tawana B with Not Your Normal Conversation. Hello, I miss you guys. I know I say this all the time, and I want you to know I look better than I feel, but I love you and I'm here. I wouldn't miss this interview with the councilwoman. Uh, I have a story to tell about Miss Ruth Z because I didn't interview her when I was interviewing everybody that was running the race, ran into her somewhere and found out that I almost missed an opportunity to clap for her. She is she made history. And I'm not going to be like everybody else and say, well, you almost made history. She made history. She made history because she's the first Haitian American Boston City Council at large. And I'm going to clap for you right now because I can. Thank you for being here. I wouldn't miss this interview. So don't feel sorry for me. As long as I look good, we look good. So that's all that matters. I want you to know that I appreciate you. It was a pleasure to meet you. Everybody say hello to the Boston City Council at Large, Ruth Z.
Hello, everyone. I'm excited to be here.
Oh, well, I'm excited to have you here. I'm really excited to have you here. So first, I just want to ask you a question because not just as a minority, because I'm going to get right into it with you because you're young. And of course,
I don't know. I never know if I'm young or old. I can't tell. So,
nah, honey, you're young. And I have done a lot of reading on you since I met you at the event. And of course, you know that I was very embarrassed for not interviewing you because I feel like you are fighting for a great cause and you have a lot to bring to the table. So there's no way we can deny who you are as an individual when you were running the race and when you made it to the top. So I was reading on you, and you grew up in Mattapan, High Park. You come from, Haitian immigrant parents who worked very hard. Um, I love the fact that it says in an article that I was reading about you that you went to Boston Public Schools, but then here's where I clapped again. I think I jumped out of my seat like 50,000 times reading on you. You went to Boston Public Schools, but you also went to Columbia University and Harvard Law School.
that is true. That's true. Yep. Thanks to
You
great
also,
teachers, great parents, great community that raised me. So,
yes, yes, yes. And you're an attorney,
I am an
right?
attorney. Yep.
Yes, yes.
Still practicing, even as a city councilor. Not in the way like I don't go to court yet, but a lot of the people know that I'm an attorney. They know that I'm a city councilor, and they know that I'm an attorney. So the advice that I give is a bit different than the advice that a counselor who doesn't have that legal experience is able to give. And I'm glad that God gave me this talent that I'm able to share with others.
Of course, of course. You know, I have to say I'm fascinated by you. So you know that I'm like less than a year away from law school. Next fall, I'll be in law
Mhm.
school, and you also know
Mhm.
that I'm formerly incarcerated, and so it took a lot for me to get here. And for you, your struggles and your worries in the community was housing and schools and all of those things. You said that those are some of the things that led you to run for Boston City Council. Can you just tell me what was the main thing that drove you to run for Boston City Council?
Yeah. So I knew that I was at a time in my life. First of all, big ups to you and your journey and going up to law school. This is the type of you are someone we need as a lawyer here, and so I'm excited for you and for your journey,
Thank
um,
you.
and here to support any way that I can. For
I'm glad
me,
you said that.
yeah, no, for sure. For me, housing is fundamental, right? You can't have a good job if you don't really have a place, if you don't have a place to live. You
Mhm.
can't have health if you don't have housing. So a housing first model is really important. We also see from the data that kids with more of a stable housing situation are able to perform better academically.
Mhm.
Stability matters to our families and to our young kids. And so as an attorney, I started out practicing in housing court,
Right.
defending people facing evictions and foreclosures. Oftentimes, brown and black women. Also, when you look at the data and you hold everything constant, black
Mhm.
and brown women with children are evicted disproportionately than any other population.
Right.
Boston Housing Court is a court that damns people for being poor, for being old, for being disabled. And so intervening as an attorney in that situation was very important. Not all of the work that I did was like in front of a judge. It was actually like in the hallways, negotiating with opposing counsel, the attorney for the landlords on, here's a repayment schedule that this tenant will be able to meet, as long as you dismiss this eviction matter. And none of those attorneys really wanted to be there. They understood too that the issue was an issue of poverty, issues of the legacy of racism, that our people face displacement at a higher rate. We're homeowners at a lower rate because of redlining and block busting. So I ran for this position because I think it's important to have someone who has an assorted lived experience to be able to bring that to bear to fight for our people who live in communities that have been historically excluded and disinvested in. I'm talking about the Mattapans, the Dorchesters, the Roxburys, the East Bostons, right? Places that we too often forget. And so my job and my role is to think about, how do we center the voices of those who we've excluded? I think about, our formerly incarcerated individuals, which is why I fought to fully fund our Office of Returning Citizens. And so not only fund that office, but to also give it grant-making capacity to work in partnership with community-based organizations that are led by formerly incarcerated folks themselves, like Leslie Cradle, like so many other folks who are doing really great work in this space. So that we bolster the work that they're doing and for their support. As a Haitian woman or daughter of Haitian immigrants, I think about our migrant communities and the things that we need to do to further support their housing needs and their educational needs in our Boston public schools. As a Black woman, I think about, as a chair of the Civil Rights Committee, think about the rise in white supremacy. And how do we make ourselves here feel safe when every other day it seems like a school or a church is being shut up because folks are Black or something else? And so those are the reasons why I run. Those are the issues that keep me up at night. When people call me and are like, what has happened today? I was at Target before this and ran into a brother who I had talked to a few weeks ago who works for the city and who needs a place to live and is facing displacement. And so talking to him again about how my office can help. So it's about meeting the people where they are and about meeting their needs every ways that we can.
I know that you had a laundry list of things that you wanted to achieve being in City Hall. And I know that, as a minority and then being a woman, I'm sure you're faced with a lot of adversity when you come to the table with issues and things that you feel need to be changed. How do you go about getting people to get on board with what you believe is right for the Black and Brown community? Because I'm sure some of your counterparts and people that you work with are not minorities, and they may have a big voice as far as what they believe should happen in the Black and Brown community. And how do you offset that in a way that kind of, gently says to them, no, this is not your fight? How does that work for you?
Yeah, I think that's a really great question. I'll use the Office of Returning Citizens as well. We held a number of hearings where formerly incarcerated individuals came and spoke and gave testimony. And surprisingly, a number of my white colleagues, were in full support of fully funding the office, of fully giving more additional money, because they were able to hear from the lived experience of folks who've had these experiences. And it's really hard to look somebody in their face who is telling you about the problem that they had and how we as a society have failed them, and to turn your back on that. We, as a city of Boston, and since I like to repeat certain things over and over, we are a wealthy city. That wealth is built on property taxes that are based and rooted in part on legacies of racism and discrimination, because the Black and Brown families weren't allowed to purchase homes in certain neighborhoods or weren't given mortgages. And so when we talk about really corrective action to correct for our policy wrongs to bring us towards the future. And I do that because everyone is saying the word equity now, but I want people to understand what that means. Equity requires deeper investments in people who we've harmed, we as in the government at large and society. And so I think I try to frame the issue in that way to allow people who otherwise would be uncomfortable, who may not know a lot about the situation, to allow them to walk in and become supporters. Now, I don't always bat 100, but on some issues that I think that are important, and I'm able to get support. For example, like housing for Haitian migrants that have been coming across the southern border. My colleagues, and I tell them this, they want to all come and celebrate the Haitian parade and want to make sure that they get votes, the vote of the Haitian community, because we vote. And I say, like, look, I'm glad for you to come out to the celebration, to come to this party, but when I bring legislation to the floor, right, or an ask to the floor that's about my community, it's not just fun and games, it's also about policy. It's not just about getting their vote and saying, right, oh, I came and I celebrated Flag Day with you and I love the Haitian community. If you love us, show that in how you vote and support for our policy.
Absolutely. And I couldn't agree with you more. How do you think City Hall, now that you're sitting in one of those seats, how do you think that they really feel about reentry and rehabilitation for formerly incarcerated people and mass incarceration?
Well, here's the thing. I don't know if they necessarily, it's a good question. I don't really know what necessarily their framework is for our criminal legal system, whether they believe that it is built on the legacy of white supremacy and racism. I don't know if my colleagues will see that, right? That we have a criminal legal system that is based on the assumption of criminality of Black folks disproportionately, which is an absurd, like something that I like to say as well, it is absurd that society has bought into this idea that there's a propensity towards violence or criminality among Black people.
Yes.
And the ultimate criminality was actually performed against us, right? When you think about the barbarity of slavery and of enslavement and of colonialism and all of that, that is the definition of barbarity. But yet we have allowed society and this world to trick us into believing that there is something about our skin color that harbors more violence or more criminality. And that is just false. And so that is a framework from which I operate, right? That we have a criminal legal system that is rooted, that really has spun out of the treatment of Black folks in slavery. This idea of how do we, continue to use Black folks as a labor source when we think about the pennies on the dollar that folks who are imprisoned make while they're engaged in labor, or when we think about the way that we disenfranchise communities in terms of like how we count, how we lose out on our people for census purposes and for figuring out where federal dollars go. Because if our Black and brown folks are in prison, that's fewer people to count in our cities and in wherever they live, and that's fewer dollars to the cities. I think about all of the ways in which our mass incarceration and criminal legal system continue to be manifestations of white supremacy. And so that is my framework. I don't know if that is a framework for everyone. And so and here's the thing, at this moment, I don't know if that needs to be the framework for everyone. I will say what I need to say about how I frame things, and then hopefully you will get with me on the solution, right? Even if you don't necessarily believe that, a lot of what we're seeing today is a continuation of the failure to give Black folks their 40 acres and a mule, right? Or the failure of the Freedmen's Bureau after the Civil War, or, the ways in which xenophobia really impacts how, white folks are able to support policies that they see as benefiting primarily Black folk when we think about our social safety net, all of us benefit. But the idea that we have trouble building coalitions because of this deep-seated sense of racism that permeates this country. So look, I don't know if everyone agrees with me. All of my colleagues agree with me on that framework, right? Or on the idea of critiquing capitalism, which is rooted in the idea, which got its start here in this country in the idea of slavery, right? Slavery being the premise for how we practice capitalism, this sort of extractive force that just takes from our communities. But let's agree on sort of the solutions and on the policy answers.
Absolutely. So I have to say this, since if you look at large, you're big on housing and home ownership in the Black and brown community. Now we go back to I am formerly incarcerated, so I know how many people are in there that could be doing better than what they're doing being incarcerated. Meaning that we're going to come home and we're going to try to become a part of a community and maybe purchase a home one day and get housing and all of the struggles of housing for people who have certain crimes. Well, if you've been convicted of certain felonies, you can't apply for housing. So it seems like there's a roadblock for people like me, unless I'm gonna I pay market rent. But for other people, that's not always the case, and they cannot do that. So how is it that we combat this so that when people come home, they're home for good? Because a lot of times housing is one of the biggest issues in the Black and brown community for those who are formerly incarcerated.
Yeah. And I think that's an excellent question, Tawana. I always like to look at those who are leading on this issue. I look at Leslie Cradle, the founder of Justice for Housing, and the work that she does to not only, she's been working in partnership with the Boston Housing Authority to get set aside vouchers for formerly incarcerated residents so that they're able to access housing. But not only that, she helps them, formerly incarcerated folks, navigate the process of looking for homes, right? Because oftentimes people face discrimination, or it's really hard, or it's really expensive. And I think that support is really necessary. I believe in that hand-holding that we got to do with folks, our vulnerable populations, to get them stabilized, right? So that we can reduce recidivism, so that we can help people become whole, so that we can recognize our own failures and how we've treated and helped and harmed people. And so I think that's a really great model that I want to continue to support as part of the ARPA funding, where we got almost $400 million, or 350 or 60 that we just allocated from the federal dollars to important needs. I advocated and was successful in getting a $1.1 million set aside for pilot housing for folks, formerly incarcerated folks, to help them transition to out of incarceration into a stable household. And I'm really excited about that, because I think there are really great models in other cities, and that Leslie is doing, both around this rapid rehousing, around, like you said, home ownership, which is also really important. Our formerly incarcerated folks should be homeowners too, just like anybody else. And so I'm incredibly encouraged by that work. A lot of this is like, how do you put your dollars to, if you say you care about an issue, your dollars have to reflect and represent that. And so I think those are the building blocks for the work that we're trying to do. And we know that folks face particular barriers when it comes to vouchers. So I think the set aside program has been really great. And you just look at, I've been to visit loved ones who have been incarcerated. Right. And I know that part of the reasons for their success is that strong support network from family and friends once they got out. But not everybody has that. And not everybody and because they didn't have that, that's part of the reason why some folks, right, have got into the situation in the first place. So how do we shower folks with support, resources, and love, and the reminder that none of us are the worst things that we've ever done? And then I like to say, as a corollary, none of us are the best things we've ever done either, right? We're all like somewhere in the middle, just trying to figure it out. And so how do we support people so that they know that, like, look, you're out. How do we make sure that you stay out forever? And housing is an important part of that.
And so is an education. I'm big on education, but the first prestige university I went to was BU, Boston University, behind the wall. Mm-hmm. If I walked into Boston University and applied, maybe my grades would have gotten me in, but my pockets wouldn't have been good enough to go to Boston University. But as an incarcerated woman, I was afforded the right to go. So it brings me to, why is it that Black and brown children in the communities are not being able to take advantage of college and afford the rights of other people? Like, I see MECO. I was in MECO growing up, but I know that you're big on education. And so MECO to me is kind of a form of, it's like a slap in the face, because you went to a Boston public school, and then you went to Columbia, and then you went to Harvard. And then you bus some of our Black and brown kids to another public school just in a white area, maybe because they have better books or better teachers. So how do we bring the same Boston public school that's in Newton How do we bring those schools to our Black and brown children who need this in order to survive? Because if nothing else, if they don't have an education, we've already failed.
Mhm.
So how do we get to a place in legislation where the kids are not having to, okay, so some kids can go to private school, but what about, like you said, impoverished areas? How do they go to private school? And charter schools go by numbers. If they don't pull your number, or even MECO, you can be on the list forever for MECO and never make it. You can graduate from college and still be on the list for MECO.
Mhm.
So, what does this mean for the Black and brown community? How do we get a fair shot at an education? Even someone who is formerly incarcerated and comes out and wants to change their whole life, and they start with education. Now you can't get housing and you can't get an education. So,
Yeah.
how do we make this work?
Yeah, so there's a lot there. I think what I'll first start with is saying what I believe, and what I think is because of how we've disinvested in urban communities, right? The idea of MECO, when you look at it abstractly, like it is trying to solve a problem regionally. So it's
Mhm,
not just on the city, right? On a
mhm,
city that is often really taken advantage of, for example, or is a center point for a greater region, but
mhm,
who may not have the same tax base as a suburb, right? And
mhm,
so Medco is trying to solve the problem of public education in a regional way, which I think is actually the solution to a lot of our problems, pretty regional.
mhm,
But the problem with Medco is that it's one way and it's limited, right? And
mhm,
it's also this idea that in order for us, it is a slap in the face. The idea that in order for our Black kids to get a good education, you got to put them on a bus. You got to wake up at 4 o'clock so that they can get on the bus at 5 o'clock, so that they can go out to the suburbs, and then sometimes suffer from being tokenized as the only or as the MECO kid in their schools.
mhm,
I think the issue that we got to do, and it sounds easier, and it's like we need two things. We need to better fund our public schools, and we need better management and leadership in our central office to
mhm,
provide better guidance for how our schools should run.
mhm,
So the number one question is about resources. You'll hear people say that, oh, there's so much money going into our Boston public schools. When you look at Newton or some other suburb, they're able to do so much more on a fewer on a smaller per student student per dollar basis. So let me just say, for example, someone will critique Boston public schools because they'll say we are paying, this is just throwing a number out there, for example, $10 per student, which is not the number, but it's $10 per student in Boston public schools. And look at how not well our schools are doing. Meanwhile, Newton is paying $5 per student, and all of their kids are going off to Ivy League schools. Well,
right.
our student population in Newton looks different from our student population in Boston. In
Mhm,
Boston, that $10 per student is also going to address the issues of homelessness that are pervasive among our student population. The fact that a lot of our kids show up to school without food to eat, all of these other ways that we have to find ways to wrap around our students. We have a higher number of students experiencing limited interruption in their formal education, or limited, who are 10, 11, 12 years old and don't know how to read. And those issues aren't as pervasive in Newton. So of course, Newton can do more for its students where they experience less homelessness than Boston can. And this is not to pick on Newton, right? It is just to give an example for arguments that people make about why certain districts are able to do more. And so there is that issue of like, we have disinvested in our urban schools, in our cities, and there are lots of reasons that why that has happened. A lot of that too comes down to racism, and so we need to bake an anti-racist ideology into our school framework, which is also why it's super important to have a superintendent who and leadership at central office that really understands that and operates from an anti-racist model, and that can really push us forward with a vision to really transform our schools and to make sure that everyone, no matter if they've been in BPS since they were K0 at the age of 3
mhm,
to someone who is transitioning out of Department of Youth Services, who is being held in DYS and is getting out at the
right,
age of 16, who suffered from years and years of family trauma. How do we
right.
make sure that they're on a path towards getting an education, going to college, going into a trade, those trade jobs, you become an electrician, a plumber, they pay very well too.
Mhm,
And so it's about, there's a lot there, but it's about making sure that we are being intentional about connecting folks to the resources that exist.
And I think that the reason why I ask you these questions is because when I read things about you, I see that you're very open-minded. There's of course, on the mass.gov website, they have this nice article on you, and it speaks volumes for the way they describe who you are as a African American woman, as a Haitian American. And I feel like
I'm just, African American, Haitian American, Black. I'm all of that.
I don't ever want to take away from somebody where they came from. That's the reason why. A lot of times when people describe me as a white woman, I'm not white. So I don't want to be described in that way. So that's the reason why I always try to make sure that I say the person nationality, because sometimes they're very proud of that. And I know Haitian Americans are very proud of where they came from. They're very strong, very rooted in their culture, and they believe in certain things. And so that's why I just wanted to make sure that I clarified that. But I noticed even your demeanor when I met you at the event, you're very down to earth and willing to speak to anybody and just willing to give your time, whether it's 5 minutes or a hug or, has anything stopped you from being the same person that you started to where you are now sitting in this seat? Because if you notice the caption, I said, was this seat reserved for you? And the reason why I titled it that is because, first of all, you are the first American Haitian woman to take the seat. And I'm sure there were already people who were trying to stop whatever it was that you were going to come in with. And so I want to know if you still have the same stamina, if you still have the same beliefs, if your agenda is still the same to push whatever you had when you were running for office as opposed to right now, because you're months into this now. Yeah. So
if anything, there's just like a bigger fire in my belly, right? When I was telling you that I was at Target, like I want to solve problems. I want to solve people's problems. I want to solve the city's problems. And so when I think about the work, like there's a part of this job, right? Politics, which is not fun. The politics of it all is like not fun. But where I pour myself into is both the policy solutions to help our people and the individual solutions. So like we manage Stacey Borden's New Beginning Reentry Services, where she's creating first of its kind home for women returning home from incarceration, giving them a landing ground so that they can reintegrate, so that they are wrapped in love and support and all of that. Yes. And that is an incredible mixture of a policy solution and an individual solution to someone who has a very real issue of needing a place to stay.
Yeah.
And so that's the work that excites me. It's not about me and a seat being reserved for me, because like I don't actually care about that. Right. What I care about is how do I use this space and this opportunity that I have for us, right? Mm-hmm. Like I don't care about my individual journey as much as I care about what will my people get out of this journey and this experience. And that sense of urgency is what drives me.
Wow. So we're included in the us. And that's what I picked up from you the moment I met you. And I think that's why I was immediately like, the Holy Spirit was like, oh, you ran into her on purpose, but you didn't interview her. You may have heard her name, but there was a reason why this was the appointed time for you to take some time to be in this seat, for then now for me to ask you these questions. Because when we're running, we already have what we think the community needs. And now you're in the community and you're like, well, maybe this may have changed for me, or maybe I see more of a need for this. And like you said, Stacey Borden's program, I just was there for another event, is more programs that we need. There's not enough of them, But at the end of the day, somebody like you could really push this to another level for all of us. You're right. It isn't just about you. Like I said to you before we went live, I don't feel good, but this isn't about me. I want people to know you, and I want people to know that they can approach you if they see you, as long as they're respectful. They can ask questions. They can reach out to you because you're approachable. We need more leaders like this in the community. It's not, I lead, you follow. It's I'm leading because I actually have the seat, but I want to hear your concerns. I want to know what it is that you need. I want to know how I can help you. It's not about you helping yourself. And I see a lot of that in politics, and that's why I'm kind of leery of politicians. It's like, what's really your game? Are you playing politics, or do you really want to help the community? I interviewed Senator Jamie Aldridge, and I'm actually going to be on his podcast on Wednesday. And the one thing that I picked up on him, like with you, is your transparency, your need to say, okay, I may not know much about this, but here's what I'm willing to do. Mm-hmm. And I think that we need more leaders like you. And this is why it was such an urgency for me to be here tonight, because I want people to be introduced to you if they don't know you. Mm-hmm. If they don't know who you are, if they don't know where you're sitting, I want them to know how to reach you. I want them to know if they can email you. I want them to know these things so we can be informed. The Black and Brown community, Ruthie, is we're not informed. We don't know who our Boston City Council at large is. We don't even know what districts you cover. Mm-hmm. We need to know things. Yeah, so please enlighten us, please.
Yes. So I appreciate that, Tawana. And I want more people to know about my office too, so that people know about the research. So I'm at large. Boston City Council are large. They represent all 23 neighborhoods in the city of Boston. So everything from Mattapan, Hyde Park, Dorchester, Roxbury, East Boston, Mission Hill, Back Bay, Chinatown, Fenway, and all of the other ones, the West Roxbury, Jamaica Plain, all the other ones that I didn't list. And everyone has a district counselor. But you get 4 bonus at-large counselors that can also work on your issue. Everything from like a pothole to your kid your kid has special needs and isn't receiving their individual education plan, to you have a policy issues around the environment that you want us to work on. You can reach out to my office and to me. So my email address is ruthz.louijeanne@boston.gov, which I know is difficult, so I'm going to spell it out. That's RUTHZEE.LOUIJEUN as in Nancy @boston.gov. And you can reach out to my office anytime at 617-635-4376. Again, that's 617-635-4376. And I appreciate this opportunity, Tawana, because I believe, right, that my calling and our calling, I think, is how do we live in community together? How do we be our brother and sister's keeper, right? Each other's keeper. That's what is a guiding light for me. And I think that whether you're in an elected office or or not, it is our job to share information. So if I bless you with some information that was helpful to you, my hope is that you turn around and you talk to your neighbor or your cousin or your sister or anyone who needs that information to share it. Because what I'm learning in City Hall is that so much of how you get by and get ahead is about access information. And so as much as I can share that with folks who traditionally haven't had that access, and that is our Black and Brown folks, that's our immigrant communities, that's our formerly incarcerated folks, my concern is about everybody who we in policy and government has forgotten. Mm-hmm. And how do we make sure that we don't forget and that we atone for our wrongs through our policy?
Right. And that's what we need to hear more of, because like I said, I don't think it's really about politics. I think it's time for us to start educating our communities, because we don't know enough about who's running. And sometimes we don't even vote because we don't know who's running, or we hear a name and are like, oh, maybe they're Black, I might vote for them. This is not the way we should go into an election for any seat. No matter if it's the president or if it's Boston City Council or if it's the mayor, we should never not know who we're voting for and why and what they're actually going to bring to the table. Mm-hmm. I think it's important for us to know these things in order for us to be better prepared and equipped, to be educated on what is going to work, not just for our household, but for our neighbor. 9 times out of 10, if you live in Roxbury and Dorchester, I remember when I was growing up, I knew my neighbors, I knew the kids, and my neighbors knew how to tell on me. They knew everything. So you could get a whooping by your neighbor and then go home and get another one. Yeah. And so, times have definitely changed in a sense that we are not being our brother's keeper. And I don't mean that in the sense of a bloodline. I mean that in the sense of a neighbor, an elderly person that lives in your neighborhood. How can I help them? Oh, I see that they don't get rides and they're struggling. They're in a wheelchair. Oh, maybe I could call my Boston City Council at large and maybe they could help me. See, those are the things that we don't do. We don't think it's our problem until someone gets shot and killed in the street. Now that we have a problem. But there's many other small problems that elevate into big problems in our community that we're not willing to address ever.
Yeah.
I think I'm tired of it. It's not just about me being formally incarcerated. It's just about me being educated enough to know what I saw on the inside, what I saw growing up, what I see when people suffer, because I live out of the city. So when I drive through, where I grew up, I see impoverished people and I want to know how we can help them, because this is not all there is to life. They don't always have to live like this. How can we help? There's only one of me. I was just down Mass and Cass. I guess my video went viral. I might have called out a couple of names about whose responsibility this was, because you took the tents down, but there's still people out there. You took the tents down, but women are still getting raped out there. You took the tents down, but people are still overdosing down there. So I want to know, mayor, governor, whoever, who is it a collective thing? Because it is a collective thing. We can't go like this. We have to go like this. We have to start encircling each other and saying, okay, this is all of our problems. We haven't done that. We have not. Yeah. So I brought you here because I want people to hold you accountable to what you said you were going to do. And if you don't, ask why, because sometimes it isn't about you. Someone's already stopping you from making this happen. I don't want people to always think, oh, well, Ruth Z, she's Boston City Council, she can make it happen. And when she does it, now I'm mad at her. So when there is an issue, I'm not going to call her because she didn't do it. Why didn't she do it? Sometimes people just can't. But at the end of the day, I want you to know that I appreciate you. I appreciate your service. I want everybody to know who you are. I'll probably be saying your name 50,000 other times. I'll probably bump into you at other events.
Yeah.
I want you to know that I just appreciate your service and your commitment. When I saw, the reason why I think I am attracted to the person that you are is because you didn't make one excuse for anything that happened in your life. You were impoverished. You went to Boston Public Schools, but then I see that you got all the way to Harvard. I had a lot of traumatic things happen in my life. And at a certain point, I knew better, but I didn't do things differently. So I'm looking at a woman who had some of the same upbringing I did, but chose to do something different. And I want the Black and brown faces to see more people like you and like me, but in two different lights, so that they know that there's hope no matter what.
Amen. Amen. Amen.
I'm so proud of you. Like, I can't say it enough. I skip past the Boston Public School. I have the chills. And then I see Harvard Law School. And I'm like, well, Harvard Kennedy School? I have 14 speaking hours there, by the way, to sit on a piano. And, it is an honor to be there. But more importantly, to know people that come from there with the same skin color as me. I am proud of you. And I know that our community is proud of you. I know Stacy loves you. I told her you were going to be on the show. She was like, I'll watch it. Everyone watches the playback. No one watches the live. Everyone wants to see it afterward. I said, Ruth Z's going to be. She goes, that's my girl. There's people, when they hear your name, it's like, that's my girl. And they mean that. And I'm
moved by that. And that only encourages me to do the work better and more and faster.
Well, you can only go at your own pace, but we know that you're working. When I seen the group of women that you were surrounded by, Ayanna Presley, Stacy, just all the people in the community, China Tyler, she's going to be on the show soon, people who are willing to do whatever, whenever, even if they lose sleep, because it's not about you. I constantly tell people this. You may not sleep at night. You may miss a meal or two worried about something, but you're saving lives. And you're right, it's not about you. It's about us. We're a collective.
Yeah.
And I thank you. And anybody that wants to reach out to Ruth Z, there is her number, 617-635-4376. And then there is her email address. It's in the chat. I definitely will post it on the live video so that everyone who needs to just even ask questions, even if it's about an education. I mean, this lady went to Harvard. She might need to, because I smiled like that because I'm studying for my LSATs before. And Lord have mercy, I'm going to be using your number.
Yes. Call me.
I've been doing good on the pretest, but those are the pretests where I'm timed at home, at my leisure. whereas
Yeah.
opposed to being in a place where I'm timed and they say your time is up.
Yep.
You
Yep.
did this. You've done this. You're a sister that's done this before me. So you've paved the way for somebody like me, even though I was formerly incarcerated, to do exactly what you're doing right now.
And others have paved the way for me. We look at Supreme Court Ketanji Brown Jackson. We look at all the women, all the dope Black women who paved the way so that I could be here. And hopefully I'm doing something for the next generation. We all as Black women, this is what we know. How do we help each other, lift each other up? How do we understand that we are part of a continuum and a collective to make sure that we are not only surviving, but finding ways for us to heal from all the trauma that we've experienced, and to lean on each other when necessary and to build each other up. That's the work.
And I thank you for that, because we need to hear that. We're so busy fighting against each other. We don't only fight against each other, then we fight against everybody else. So it's like, how do we ever win? And I want my podcast is to make people aware, but more importantly, to educate the Black and Brown community, because we're really ignorant to a lot of things. And it's unfortunate, but it's high time that somebody like me with a big mouth just speak out. I have nothing to lose at this point. Rachel Rollins tells me, she's like, you're the right person for the job. And I'm like, yeah. I mean, if me, why not me?
Mm-hmm.
Why not you? The minute I saw you, I said, you look like you're 12. So first of all, I didn't even know it was you. So somebody tells me, they're like, oh, that's Brucey. I'm like, oh no. I'm like, she looks like she's 12 years. How old is she? They're like, just go talk to her. I was like, look at all of these Black women leading communities of people. It can't get no better than that.
Mm-hmm.
It can't. To see all of you beautiful women in one space, I was overwhelmed. I think I cried like 2 or 3 times that day. It's a blessing and an honor to have you. And I pray that you run again as many times as you can,
Mm-hmm.
And that you keep fighting for us.
Thank you. I pray for you on your LSAT journey. I pray for you on your healing journey, that God bless you and that he covers you in his love and grace for all that you are facing and trying to do. And that, your outward beauty matches your inner self and sense of health and all of that. So that is my prayer for you, and to also be a resource for you in your journey towards law school. And so I am, in the way that you express pride in me, I am proud of you. And all that you have overcome to be where you are. And this is just the beginning. So
thank you so much. It was a pleasure to have you on the show tonight. I appreciate you. I am in awe of you. I am proud of you. And thank your parents for me, because, this is a big accomplishment. Everybody, thank you for joining Not Your Normal Conversation. For those of you who will watch later, make sure that you look up Ruth Z's, Boston City Council at Large, because I think that you'll be surprised at the gentle giant. And I say gentle giant because she's gentle, but she has a lot to bring to the table, and we need her. We need more people like her. So stay tuned for what she has next. City Hall, at an event. If you ever see her, say hello. Very friendly, laid back person. Ruth Z's, I thank you for coming. Thank you, everybody. Join me in August. Unfortunately, I have some health issues I need to address, so I will be away until August addressing them so that I can get better and heal. But I had to be here for this interview tonight. It was important for me to be here and to speak with you and to share your experience, strength, and hope with the rest of the Black and Brown community, because honestly, we need your strength. We need you. I'm seeing too much disparity. We just need you so bad that I just had to sit here tonight no matter what. God bless you, Ruth Z's. I will be in touch because I have something for you. I'll send it to your assistant just for being on the show. You are a blessing. Everybody, have a good night. Stay blessed. Stay out of your own way and educate yourself. Have a good night, everybody.